Hello and welcome to this special discussion on what is wrong with India's telecom sector. Now, here is a paradox. The telecom sector in India has been the fastest growing over the last decade and more. In just over a decade, several companies have got a subscriber base between them of a billion plus, and telecom is widely regarded as the success story in India. But the paradox is, while it is the success story for India, it is also the most problematic sector in terms of the issues relating to policy and regulation that this sector is going through. And this was recently exemplified by the largest telecom player, Vodafone Idea. They have a partnership with Idea. Their global CEO, Nick Reed, making a sensational statement that he does not want to invest in India anymore. Vodafone, by the way, have already invested equity of 15 billion plus, and he also announced that Vodafone was writing down its entire investment in India in their balance sheet in London, which is their headquarters. Vodafone head office balance sheet. So why was the global head of one of the largest telecom companies in the world, which has been present in India for so many years, had to say such a thing? His statement created a sensation. Meanwhile, simultaneously we saw a Supreme Court judgment again about a case which has been pending or has been going on for about 12 to 15 years on the definition of average gross aggregate gross revenue for the telecom companies. Now, we have spent about 15 years deciding what should be the definition of gross revenue, a share of which the telecom companies pay to the government. Now, to discuss some of these issues, we have with us, we couldn't have had a better person today. We have with us Rahul Khullar, a former chairman of Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. He's been, I have no hesitation to say that he's been one of the most effective regulators, a fair regulator, and during his period, Indian telecom industry saw a fair bit of good regulatory governance. Welcome to our show, Rahul. Now, let me start with a very basic question which people are asking. Why should it take the policy makers or the government or the courts about 15 years to decide the definition of aggregate gross revenue? I mean, it is this problem, the policy confusion and the subsequent matter in the courts, which went through TD SAT, Telecom, Appellate Authority, courts, ended up in the Supreme Court. It's taken so many years to decide this. Now, do you think any economy can run policy or regulation like this? I mean, you've been a regulator, so I want your views on this.
Yeah, I think you're right. It should not have taken 15 years to sort this matter out. And part of it is quite simply the fact that our judiciary is overstretched, so it doesn't matter whether it's a telecom case or a power case or a civil suit or a criminal suit. It just takes so much time. And the government knew that all along. So the government could well have settled this dispute well. It did not need to drag on for 15 years. So if you want to know why it took 15 years, partly our judiciary takes that much time, and more importantly, the government just was plain stubborn. Second, and the most substantive question is that the government of India defined what was GR in end of 2001, okay? And no sooner had the definition been made, within 18 months, these guys were in court. So what that's telling you is that basically the lag between that you define it and you raise the demand and the telcos are in court. So it's nothing new. They always believed that this was an unfair assessment. Now the problem is very simple. It is actually, what is gross revenue? Okay, what does gross revenue for a company mean? Now the courts have interpreted that to mean, or the Supreme Court has interpreted that to mean, anything that's written in the license agreement. All right? Now this includes notional revenue, it includes dividends, it includes interest, it includes all sorts of income. So the telco's point was very simple. Why is the telecom business regulated? Because I have a license. If I have a license and I have to pay a license fee, then the license fee should be based on what I earn from the license. Therefore, what should count as revenue for purposes of paying my license fee should be what I earn from the license. Any supplementary income I earn, which has nothing to do with the license, surely you can't club that and start.
So that was the origin of the
This is the origin of the dispute, and it has carried on.
So the outcome is, Rahul, the outcome is that the Supreme Court has slapped about 1.3 lakh crore, 1.4 lakh crore of additional burden on the sector.
That's correct.
And because of which some of the companies have declared, like Vodafone has declared a quarterly loss of 50,000 crore. Airtel has declared, some 30,000 crore or thereabouts. So how do you think? So the balance sheets are bleeding, right? The telecom balance sheets. So how do you reconcile this? The fastest growing sector for over a decade, and the balance sheets are bleeding, and bleeding like never before. So how do you deal with this?
Okay.
And the Supreme Court has said that this has to be paid within a period of, I think, 3 months.
Okay, let me separate out the Supreme Court ruling and focus a little on the finances of the industry, then you'll understand. I think, what you said right at the beginning is true. It's the fastest growing sector, it's a sunrise sector, it's done great things to transform India's economy, and that's true. Okay? All that is true because there has been huge outreach, there has been huge expansion, and there's been a huge increase in the numbers of people covered by it. I'm not talking about teledensity, but roughly speaking, 45 to 50% of our population have a connection. Now that's a huge change in the matter of actually a decade, because all this was done by 2010. By 2010, you had hit 950, a billion. And essentially, after 2010, you've sort of been around 1 billion, 1.1 billion, in that range. It hasn't changed very much. So the big shift that took place was the expansion in coverage. And that had huge economic benefits, which is what you and I recognize in terms of growth of GDP, connectivity, information, etc. So that's one side. Those are the economic and social benefits as an economist would measure them. Now come to the finances. Now the finances, the problem was and has been that as tariffs started falling, you got more consumers coming in, but the tariffs fell so badly that it knocked the bottom out, not of the balance sheet, but of the profit and loss.
So you're referring to the kind of predatory pricing that
I'm saying even before 2012, this had started happening.
There was
huge. That was because the government had this misplaced policy that more competition, the better. Now the point is, nowhere in the world are there more than 3 to 4 companies, maximum 3.
But India had about 6, 7 players.
India had 16.
Okay, at one time 16.
Had 16 companies working in the market. So it was absurd, and that excessive hyper competition where everybody thought they're going to make a kill caused a huge crash in prices. That caused this thing. The second problem in the finances was the Supreme Court judgment of 2012, which essentially knocked the stuffing out of many foreign investors. And what it did was
You're talking about the 2G judgment, is it?
2G scam. So that created panic in the industry and huge write-offs. The implication was that if you looked at any company in 2012, they were all bleeding. It didn't matter whether it was Arcom, Airtel, they were all in trouble.
All in trouble, yeah.
Okay? What has happened between 2012 and 19 is that they nursed themselves back to some degree of health by the end of 2015 because they steadily increased tariffs at very small, very small amounts, but that's good enough. Then 2016, you started a price war. The entrance of Jio started the price war. That was again a race to the bottom in terms of tariffs. So you've had a second
this
round.
was the entry of Reliance Jio and the 7-month regulatory holiday that they got too.
They got all sorts of holidays and benefits from the regulator. Yeah. I don't want to go there, but what I'm trying to say is the industry went through two shocks. One price shock came because there was excessive competition. The second price shock came because of a pure tariff war, as in any oligopoly. And this has left them crippled. In the background of all this are things which affect both the balance sheet and the profit and loss account, which is your spectrum. Up till 2010, spectrum was administratively allocated. But all the renewed spectrum that came after 2014 was all at auction prices and at huge prices. When you have very large prices, it means your amortization is higher, your debt service is higher because you can't finance it from internal resource accruals. You can't finance it from internal resource accruals because your prices are too low. So essentially what is happening is the industry is getting clobbered on one side by very high auction prices on spectrum, which means they pay a huge amount to government. That's financed by bank debt, which means you have to pay bank debt, and your internal margins are squeezed. So this is the story of the industry from 2014 to 19, even before Jio came in. This is what's going on.
So Jio's entry actually
just exacerbated what was already a problem.
Because of the predatory pricing they resorted to.
Yeah. The last thing is, please understand that this is an industry where you have very rapid technological obsolescence, which means capital that I am investing today is going to be obsolete not 10 years from now, 3 years from now. Think.
So it's a big capital guzzler. Every 3-4
years. It guzzles capital faster than you can account for it. So, you know, if you were the CFO of a company, say you are CFO of Vodafone, you're booking depreciation and amortization to have replacement costs covered and to cover the charge of spectrum. Before you know it, you have to write off much of your capital equipment because the technology has changed. It's gone. Meaning, think today.
It's happening even now. We are at the threshold of moving towards 5G.
Ask yourself, 2010, the 3G auctions took place. The first 2012 was the first set of 3G rollouts. Yeah. But 3G actually caught on around 2013. You're barely in 2019 and you're saying 3G is over. Yeah. Every switch to 4G, and now you're started talking about 5G.
So Rahul, how do you read the Vodafone global head's statement that
I think
India's regulators are biased, and he made two statements. One some time ago that Indian regulation is biased, and the other statement that he made more recently after the Supreme Court judgment, which imposed a fresh burden of 40,000 crore on the industry. He said that he will not make any fresh investment, and he's written down the entire investment in India in his global books.
Okay, let me separate the judgment and other parts from a pure finance look. If I was the CEO of a company where you're asking me for a subsidiary located in some foreign country, it doesn't matter whether it's India or Vietnam, which is guzzling capital at this rate, and then more and more liabilities are arising, at some stage I owe a responsibility to my shareholder who is not in that country, and that shareholder is going to ask me, what the hell are you throwing good money after bad? Meaning you've lost your bet on, let's say, India or Vietnam. Why should I, the shareholder, authorize you to spend another 20 billion? God knows whether that 20 billion will also go down the toilet. Yeah. So please try and understand, this is not it's very easy living in India to get emotional about what a foreigner says. Try look at it from their perspective. They're looking also at an investment. It's a commercial proposition. It's not a charity that they're running. And therefore, from that perspective, what he's saying is correct, that from the pure finance part of it, how long am I going to keep throwing money at a company that is not giving me any return?
Yeah.
And where liabilities suddenly arise, all right? So this is one. Now the backdrop, and the backdrop is valid. First, on the regulator, let me put it a little more politely. I think he is right in saying the regulators have not been fair, and I say regulators. I say regulators in the sense I refer obviously to TRAI, but equally regulatory functions are discharged by the central government.
There's a bit of overlap, yeah.
There's an overlap, and I think what the CEO is saying is he's not alone. Everybody in India is saying it too. That neither has TRAI nor have the government been fair in their handling of the industry, and that they have been partisan to one particular firm. Now this, meaning whether you like it or not, this is accepted, widely accepted, and there have been pink paper editorials on it. The fact of the matter is, merely because it's a foreigner saying it does not make it untrue. It is still true. If your own pink paper says it, it's fine and dandy. Just because he's sitting in London and saying it's not. So that I think is, give him his due, he's making a valid point.
So you think he's making a valid point?
I think he's made a valid point.
And if you just follow up on what he said.
On the point of the regulators.
If Vodafone actually tomorrow withdraws, right, or does not put additional investment, do you think India is moving towards a duopoly situation where there just be two players, and then the prices will be raised on data or voice, and then things would be different?
Let me qualify that. I think he is right in saying there is regulatory bias, and regulatory impartiality and independence does not exist. Okay, that is correct. I think the second point he is making is that from the government, which is sort of rolling out its red carpet for foreign investment, we deserve better treatment. The point he is making is, look, Vodafone's got screwed over twice. Once on the retrospective tax problem. Now put that aside. The second thing is
that happened during UPA, right?
That happened in UPA. For 15 years, government had the option to settle this entire AGR issue.
Sure.
Because you have not settled it, now the Supreme Court is saying cough up 1.5 lakh. So from a foreign investor perspective, from a domestic investor perspective, there is a concern that, look, why didn't the government wake up and sort this problem out earlier? Why are we waiting for this crisis?
And the irony, Rahul, is that after the Supreme Court order, the same government sets up a committee of bureaucrats to rescue the industry. First, you take 15 years to find a case,
then you set up a bureaucrat committee to set it up.
So
they give you some palliative.
Do you find this a bit of a paradox?
I think they have not come to grips with the magnitude of the problem and the gravity of the situation, and they don't understand, sadly speaking, what is happening in the industry and the magnitude of the money that's involved. To go back to your question on the duopoly, it is definitely the case.
We are moving towards the duopoly.
That if this is not resolved in some way, then you are headed toward a duopoly, and meaning there are friends of mine from Mumbai who periodically speak to me, and they are openly talking about monopoly. Meaning, so I think that is a real risk, and the idea that BSNL and the state government PSU will be a competitor, neither you nor I actually believe that. So
the government is funding, freshly funding BSNL MTNL, but I think it's a mere symbolic. It's a symbolic act.
It's a symbolic act, right? So I think this is the nature of the problem. Let me give you some orders of magnitude which you'll understand. Look, in the industry today, roughly speaking, okay, the entire EBITDA margin for the entire industry is about 30,000 crores, okay? And that 30,000 crores is not sufficient because it has to pay for depreciation, amortization, taxation and interest, all right? On top of that, if you add a charge of 1.5 lakh crores, that is 5 years worth of EBITDA. Look at the margin, look at the magnitude of the problem.
Sure.
And if it's 1.5 crores, it's actually 1.47 lakh crores. If it's 1.47 lakh crores, that is roughly equal to 70% of their annual gross revenues, which are due to the government as dues which have to be paid immediately. How is this possible? How can any industry work like this? So it's very sad that you don't understand. What I'm trying to get at is, it's one thing to look at a problem from its economic perspectives, which is what are the economic benefits the industry has bestowed, and that is the first part of what you talked about, and there's no question about that. But businesses are not about only economic benefits like economists like to believe, they're also about going concerns. These businesses have to survive. If the business doesn't survive, the industry does not survive. And the point is that today your EBITDA margin is 22-23% on average. Vodafone is booking losses, Airtel is booking losses, and Jio is making barely a small profit.
But there's one, Rahul, here, there is one observation, analytical observation that has come from industry, let's say from financial analysts, fund managers. They say that while industry is toting up losses, right, there's no doubt about it. I think even Reliance Jio at the moment is not profitable.
No, not very particularly profitable. Small margins of profit, very small margins, small. Correct.
Yeah.
It is profitable, but very small margins.
Very small. Whereas Airtel is definitely in losses, but they're growing their market share. So people are using the market share logic, and just as in the case of say unicorns, in the case of companies like Amazon, etc., they keep increasing market share and the valuations go up, but they don't show profits in the books. So is the telecom sector, if there are just two players left, their market share goes up, they get the market share of maybe if Vodafone tomorrow withdraws, and on that basis what we are seeing today is a huge uptick in the stock market valuations of both Reliance Jio and Airtel. So what does that tell you?
It tells you that speculation is very dangerous business. It tells you that people in the stock markets don't necessarily know what's going on. Let me give you an example.
No, Rahul, I want to add intervene here. One more point I want to add. It's possible that the stock market is discounting a situation where there is a genuine duopoly, and once there is a duopoly, there is an understanding between the two players, Airtel and Jio, with their respective subscriber bases, which would be then 300-400 million each if there is a duopoly. And then all that they have to do is just double the price, and the moment they double the price from the present 191 rupees, whatever the rental, then they straight away come into profits, right?
Correct. Okay, let me put it yeah, okay.
So are you saying that the stock market is in that sense what it is discounting is totally wrong?
Let me separate the stock market and the price decision. Okay, let me do the price decision, then I'll come to the stock market. The price decision is this: actually you need very small increases in the price, tariff on calls or tariff on data. You don't need very large increases to turn the health of an industry around. So if for instance a 10 to 20% price hike is put into effect, which has never been put into effect so far, in the end it will add, how much? 15 paisa, 20 paisa to a call. Yeah. That's huge. Exactly. In terms of revenues that will come in. It's very small for you and me, but it's huge.
Because the base is very wide.
Base is very large. So what I'm saying is that very small increases which are irrelevant to you in day-to-day transaction
will be big revenues for them.
For very big revenues. So that's the first thing to recognize. They don't need to increase prices by rupee or 2 rupees. Much smaller, far more modest amounts, and they'll be. However, this will take care of their day-to-day finances and their day-to-day problems. this does not take care of the huge overhang of 1.5 lakh crores. Okay?
The debt overhang you're talking.
Not debt, the AGR dues, that the Supreme Court dues. Those dues are not going anywhere. If I have to find 1.5 lakh crores, there's no way I can increase prices to find it. So that's one thing. Stock markets. Stock markets are dangerously speculative. Now, everybody, as I told you, friends from Mumbai are talking about monopoly and duopoly. So, I think the rumor mill drives Mumbai's stock markets, and therefore you take an educated gamble, hey, this guy is going to pull out, there will be only 2 firms left. I will buy shares and hope these 2 firms survive.
And that's what is happening. The shares of Airtel and Jio are soaring, and Vodafone Idea collapsed.
Without any relation to their earning capacity. What is their earning per share? The problem with this sort of decision making, and I'm going to give you an example which has nothing to do with the telecom industry, and I'm warning you. Everybody thought ILFS was dandy. Balance sheet looked huge. Its profit and loss account was looking fine. Only if you looked at the balance sheet, you find very large numbers of people of accounts receivable, which is people are not paying.
Thank God it was not listed.
And I'm saying all your brightest rating agencies of the world, they didn't see it. They didn't see DHFL. DHFL is listed.
Yeah, that's listed, yeah, sure. Okay. They didn't see DHFL. Yeah.
What I'm saying is that what happens in stock markets and these places, even where credit rating agencies, people can make colossal blunders and not know what is going on. Now, if I was, maybe I am risk averse, but if I was to think about it, I would be very careful with my money right now. And a gambler could take to the telecom sector.
Yeah. That's your view, okay.
And I am not a gambler, so I would probably say thank you, I'll wait till the dust settles. Because understand, any decision of the government can suddenly change everything. Tomorrow morning, for instance, a review petition has been filed. Supposing the Supreme Court changes its view.
What is the solution, Rahul? You wrote a piece, article recently in Business Standard, where you gave some very sensible suggestions. How do you this sudden financial burden which is fallen on the industry, on the companies?
Okay, let's separate the immediate financial burden and going forward. Yeah. First thing, there's a report which we wrote in 2015 which says change the gross revenue definition. Why? Because today you have a situation that GAIL will have to pay telecom dues based on its gross revenues. A gas distribution company is paying,
because
it's completely mad.
Supreme Court order extends to
everybody who has a license.
Including
anybody who has a license from Telecom and is using spectrum, you're covered by that.
So if the railways, Gas Authority,
Railtel, Gas Authority, BPCL, Oil India, everybody.
They have a license.
The Metro of Delhi has to pay up.
Yeah.
So the first thing is change that definition. We had said this 5 years ago. Government has done nothing. Accept it so that at least for the future, from immediately henceforth, you stop creating any new liabilities on that account. Second, reduce the rate at which you levy the LF and SUC. That gives the companies immediate breathing space, some cushion, because the EBITDA margin will now not be spent on giving dues to the government as LF, but they could use it as internal accruals. Third, start thinking about within the government that should penalty or interest on penalty be leviable. If for 15 years these guys had a legitimate case, and everybody has told you it's a legitimate case, TRAI has said so, TDSAT told you.
And you mentioned in your article that until
2011 everybody was saying this is a genuine dispute.
Supreme Court said it was a genuine dispute.
Absolutely genuine dispute. So then why are we levying penalty and interest? Why?
For that period, right?
For that period. At least remove that, if not altogether. Lastly, ask yourself, what you have, as I explained to you, you've had two problems in the industry. Two price shocks. One which came in 2010-12, another section shock which came now. The price war has wrecked the industry. Why are we not thinking of a price floor, which acts as a ratchet? That is, you can't go below this. Sorry, you simply cannot go below.
You suggested that price floor.
I am not alone. Meaning, please don't think that I am the only one suggesting it. A lot of people, both in the there is a considered view within the Department of Telecommunications of officers working there who also think that keeping.
In fact, there is a view, Rahul, that this price floor should have come back in 2016 itself.
That's exactly what.
When Jio entered the market.
That's what that's my view. That's not necessarily what everybody will.
Because if you had a price floor then the state of the sector would have been better, and Jio would not have been able to resort to predatory pricing in the way they did.
My guess is that Jio would still have got its customers. Meaning, look, I have no doubt that Jio is delivering a good quality service, and it has all. Meaning, there's nothing wrong with that.
That's one of Jio's argument, that the others have not delivered good technology.
Yeah, okay.
Like
so
I
have no doubts about the quality of the service they're doing, and therefore I believe they could have got to their customer base without going through this havoc and the price war. Please remember, the third of the 3 suggestions or 4 suggestions I've told you, 2 deal with the future. Accept the recommendation on redefining GR and reduce the rates. This affects the future. Past, reduce the penalty and the interest on penalty.
That's about the past.
That's about the past. That refers to.
Actually, if you remove the penalty and interest on penalty, I think the burden reduces by 50%, right?
Close to 50%, half the burden.
But how do you, Rahul, how do you redefine GR in view of the Supreme Court order? Because you've also been critical of the Supreme Court order. You've said that Supreme Court has not considered some very fundamental issues at stake.
Look, I think this, without putting myself in a position that I am hauled up for contempt.
No, you can't be. I mean, you can't be.
Let me. I think, candidly speaking, there are 2 things. The Supreme Court ruled that there was a contract, and then it went on to rule that it was a voluntary contract, and the parties to the contract did not have overweening power. Now, this is plain wrong.
You argued that it was the
in
government
99.
which had
What choice did you have?
Power,
If you were, let's say you were Sunil Mittal in 99, what choice did you have? You couldn't pay 30,000 crores. You had to migrate, and if you did not migrate, whatever you had invested was gone, and you'd be bankrupt. So he had no choice. Second, are you seriously
saying that there was an element of involuntariness?
Of course, there was involuntariness. Second, seriously, have you ever been in a negotiation with the government where the government is a weak power?
No, I've been very lucky.
Come on, get real, yaar. They had them over a barrel. They could dictate whatever they want. These guys would sign.
See, you're saying that all the powers that go with the state is the most powerful.
Since I've worked 40 years in the civil service, I assure you that if I had to negotiate with the private sector on any matter, at no point of time did I feel weak and encumbered. On the contrary, the private sector was, and it didn't matter what the negotiation was. It could be a negotiation for a tariff, it could be negotiation for a rate contract, it could be any negotiation. Make no mistake, the guy sitting on the other side of the table invariably has much greater power.
Sure. So, what do you think will come out of the Supreme Court review petition? Do you think that the point that you're making,
I
think the Supreme Court could be persuaded to take a relook at the definition?
Well, I can't say what the Supreme Court will do, but I think, one thing which I suspect lawyers should be doing at this stage is not talking fine points and nuances of the law, because I've read that 153-page judgment, and pardon my saying so, lawyers have to argue law in front of a Supreme Court, but in doing that, sometimes you lose sight of the big picture. And I think this time around, when they go to the Supreme Court, they should be talking about big picture. They should be talking about the financial viability of the industry. They should be talking about was it a willing open contract? Yeah. Did somebody have this thing? And most importantly, I think they should be far more humble. There should be, the telcos should not approach the court with hubris, but with some degree, greater degree of humility that, all right, we accept what you've said, but please will you hear us on this, and pray and hope that the Supreme Court hears you out and reduces your liability. Because if meaning, for instance, if I was running a company and I had to ask a lawyer, that's what I would tell my lawyer to do right now. I don't want them going and arguing, putting out fine nuances of one point or the other and quibbling about this and quibbling. Because if you read that judgment, 100 pages, the Supreme Court justices had to spend 100 pages dispensing with or disposing of legal points that had been made. Legal nuances, accounting procedures, this, that. So that, if you read if they had stuck to the knitting, so to speak, the Supreme Court's judgment could all have been of 30 pages. You didn't need 153 pages to say.
So finally, so assuming that the Supreme Court assuming that they see some sense in the review petition, and they provide some relief.
Okay.
Some relief. So would you then say that? Do you think that it is important that the competition that exists today with three big players, at least they all should survive? In the sense, Vodafone should not exit. If Vodafone exists,
I think it would be very bad.
It will be bad for the market.
It's very bad for the market. I think that would be a very bad outcome, and I think that people should think very seriously about pushing people into a corner or pushing firms into a corner where they have to take that sort of a decision. So in my worldview, it's best that we have three players, and I'm discounting BSNL, meaning I don't think it is a serious player. They're going to put 100 or how many thousand crores into it. I am gravely doubtful that anything will come of it. So you need three people. Bottom line is this: you need three firms in the industry for the future. You need some respite, financial respite, immediately for the industry to stabilize. You cannot rush headlong into 5G with an industry that is in such terrible shape. Where's the money going to come from? And the truth of the matter is,
I think the total debt of the industry also runs into some 4 lakh crores plus.
It's just the three big telcos, just these three is 3.9 crores.
3.9 lakh crores, yeah?
3.9 lakh crores is just
nearly 4 lakh crores. Yeah.
3 lakh crores is Jio and Voda Idea. 0.9 lakh crores is Airtel.
That's a huge burden. That's a huge debt burden.
And I'm not counting BSNL, and I'm not counting the tower business and all that. You count all that up. I think the big problem is that if any of these companies, big companies, goes belly up, leave aside the international ramifications, your banks will be back to where they were 3 years ago.
Broadly, Rahul, what you're suggesting is that all the policy, regulation, maybe even the courts should be mindful of one thing, that whatever decision they take about the industry should kind of broadly ensure that the number of players that are there should survive, and it should not lead to a monopoly situation where most of them they die out and there's only one single player left.
Number one, it should not lead to monopoly. In my view, it should not even lead to duopoly.
That's monopoly or duopoly, yeah.
Okay. Monopoly or duopoly should not be allowed, and that has to be borne in mind. Second, I think we need to be fair and just. Third, as an economist, I can tell you, benefits from an industry are not measured in terms of revenues accruing to the government or the profits accruing to an industry. Yeah, social welfare is measured in completely different terms. And on that criterion, the industry has done a great job. So please don't, let's not get
all the ancillary employment, etc.
The ancillary employment, the information externalities, the, what we call net social welfare, right? Now, on that criterion, the industry has done well. let's not get carried away counting pennies, literally, in terms of these accounting things of what's mine, the government's, and what's
So
yours.
basically, you're saying that we should go back to the original principle, which says that you should balance the needs of producer surplus, consumer surplus, government revenue.
Correct. Producers and consumer surplus taken together constitute social welfare. All right. You cannot have a situation where producers' welfare is completely wiped out in the interest of consumers' welfare. All right. And the second meaning, apart from sobriety and, total justice is a flavor of the month these days. So I think in terms of total justice, you need to do that.
Article 42, whatever. Complete
I don't want
justice.
to go into the articles, but total justice is where it's at. I think the other thing is the government must recognize that its greed has led to this. And there is a serious problem, because if you're only lining one pocket and frittering it away, filling a budgetary hole, at some point of time, your nationalized banks are going to come to you and ask money from the other pocket. What have you achieved?
So finally, what essentially our entire conversation leads us to this point that policy and regulation should really sort of aim at maximizing both producer surplus, consumer surplus, at the same time retaining government revenue that is due to the government, right?
Due to government, and maintaining what the government always maintained for a regulatory industry. Balance the interest of consumer welfare with the orderly development of the industry. You must ensure a financially healthy industry, and at the same time, this thing. That's what a regulator is supposed to do.
So thank you very much, Rahul Khullar, for speaking to us. That's all for now. Thanks.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.